Mount Kenya development tour set to start next week. Allow me to introduce my panelists already in studio. First of all, I'm joined by Maliba Arnold, who's the party leader of the Progress Plus Alliance. It's a new title. We used to call him a public policy analyst. So congratulations on your new title, Bwana Party Leader.
Thank you, Jesse.
Okay.
And it feels good that you recognize that.
Okay, asante sana for your time. Equally joined by Odoyo Owidi. He has many capacities, but he's joining us as a political analyst. Odoyo, it's been a while. Karibu sana. Thank you for making time.
Thank you, my brother.
Yes, yes. Asante. So let's start with the very latest in terms of President William Ruto, who has today instituted changes within the ranks of principal secretaries and the postings to the nation's foreign service. Just some of the notable names that have featured: Susan Nakhumicha, the former health CS, makes a comeback as the permanent representative at the permanent mission of Kenya to the UN Habitat. A man who was viewed by many as the enemy of the press, the former ICT PS, Kisiangani, has now been appointed as senior advisor and member of the President's Council of Economic Advisors. Some of the names that have been reassigned: Professor Julius Bitok has been reassigned to the State Department for Basic Education, Dr. Belio Kipsang to the State Department for Immigration, Hari Kimtai has been reassigned to the State Department for Sports. So some of the changes that have been made by President William Ruto. I'd like to begin with you, Odoyo, just briefly, because this is not the first time President Ruto is reshuffling his cabinet. The president has reshuffled his cabinet, I think, up to 3 times since he was elected into office. What do you make of the ever-changing face of President William Ruto's cabinet?
First, reshuffles are a normal thing in any government. But they even become regular when there is political turmoil in the country, because the president seeks the best people for each position. Sometimes when you see one person is moved from one docket to another, it is not necessarily because they are not qualified. It is probably because they can do better in another docket. But you'll also realize that the changes that took place today, none of them were at a cabinet level, if I am not wrong. They were rather, generally PSS, and those who had been moved earlier, some of them got new portfolios. I think one such person is Nakhumicha. What I also understand by this, you realize that recently President William Ruto and Raila Odinga reaffirmed cooperation, which they said now they are going to strengthen the broad-based government. That meant that more people, more inclusive government was going to be formed. You realize in the beginning, we had a government that consisted of those who, quote in quotes, had shares in that government. And now we have realized that is segregation, that is discrimination. We must have a country where everybody is included, where everybody sits and has hopes that maybe he will be in government at one point in time or another. It is rather a case of inclusivity.
Okay, so these changes reflect the true face of Kenya. We are now inclusive as per the changes, yeah?
If we haven't achieved 100% inclusivity, we are on the way there.
Okay, smart answer. Anyway, as you come in, I'd like your comment, Maliba, on the High Court that quashed the government's directive that was issued last year by former PS Kisiangani, restricting public advertising in ministries and state corporations to KBC. The High Court ruled that the memo by the former PS is illegal. So what do you make of such policies that perpetuate discrimination and exclusion in procurement of advertising services?
Kenya's corruption is largely procurement-based. And a lot of the policies you see being made out there, well, because the point of reference here is the ruling on the adverts that was specifically going to the media, but then I have to begin from a point where we speak to what influences or what informs some of these policies that keep on going to court and bouncing back. Our corruption, let me call it our corruption, because we are the only, I think we are among the fewest countries that have got the word corruption in the constitution, that Kenya's corruption is very much procurement-based. And as much as some of these policy pronouncements are actually coached in very progressive terms, a lot of times they normally really are not directed at anything good. So you have to look at the mischief. But then we are glad that the Constitution 2010 is very robust. As many times as people have tried to actually assail it, it's actually fought back. The media freedom in this country is so robust. You know, the Bill of Rights that we have as a country is so robust that no particular individual, however creative you actually come up with suggestions, can actually stand in its way. You realize that the Constitution keeps on fighting back. The Constitution keeps on defending itself. And it's not just in that. Yeah. It's important that we actually widen up this particular conversation. So I'm not, number one, surprised that this is actually the outcome. The road to hell, of course, is punctuated with very good intentions. Quote unquote, they needed the public broadcaster, who in law should be the public broadcaster and not, quote unquote, the national broadcaster, to have a little bit of money because, quote unquote, they have got the capacity and everything else. But if you look at it differently, if you flip it, you realize it's an attempt at controlling media. Okay. It's an attempt at ensuring that the media is... because a lot of our media have actually been surviving on advertising revenue. And government is one such client, actually one of the biggest clients. Yeah. So playing politics, because one of those things you can't run away from is that there is still that feeling that in 2022, in the run-up to 2022, the media sided with the government then of President Uhuru Kenyatta against the government that eventually won. So there are still grudges, whatever way you look at it. There are still grudges that are called and have not been settled. So an attempt at trying to ensure that people are taught a little fear of God and a little of the terror of the devil. Okay. Some of these policies were aimed at achieving that. But I'm happy that the Constitution keeps on fighting back. The Bill of Rights keeps on fighting back.
Interesting. And what do you make of the reshuffle or the reorganization of government, especially at the PS's level and the foreign envoys?
First of all, we saw the memorandum of understanding between ODM and UDA. And if you look at the MOU, it reads like so many others that have come before it. Allow me to go back to 1998. When Raila Odinga had cooperation with Uhuru Kenyatta, it was in the name of uniting Kenya. When we were having a handshake again as a country in 2008, after the post-election violence of 2007, again, one of the phrases was that the country, of course, was divided and that we needed unity. In 2018, in March again, we saw a handshake on the steps of Harambee Avenue. Again, the phrase was that they were uniting Kenya. One more time again, we find ourselves there in 2025. Again, we are uniting Kenya. Of course, there are questions that you will want to ask. Does Kenya only get united when Raila is... if Raila is not in government, Kenya is divided? Of course, we are going to talk about the numbers he controls and everything else. I'm trying to think about the numbers he had in 1998. But the riding word has always been unity. Yeah. So, if, God forbid, on the morning you wake up, and probably Raila is not able to actually do a handshake, he is retired, will Kenya remain divided? If for 4 times we've not been united when he's actually done it, why hasn't he looked for Odoyo Widi here, for example, and told him to actually continue with that tradition of uniting the country by way of handshakes? Having said that, one of those things that I've actually looked at is that the initial shots of uniting the country has ensured that Western Kenya loses. In the initial shots, has lost 2 PSs. As Raila Odinga tried to unite Kenya, PS Mahati is gone, PS Kisiangani is gone. He's uniting Kenya. And of course, Western Kenya is one of those of his backyards and his strongholds. I hope they are happy that he's uniting Kenya by way of ensuring that they lose some of those seats. Even though I need to say this, that Kenya Kwanza, where I was until December, has all the capacity and the people who can stand in to do these things. It's not that they lacked capacity. Okay. It's other factors. In fact, what is happening here has got elements and punctuations of a regime survival mode that has kicked in after the Gen Z demonstrations. And number 2, focus on 2027. But it's nothing to do with the unity. It has got nothing to do with the development. It has got nothing to do with the capacity. The people in Kenya Kwanza have got massive capacity to actually run this country. Extreme capacity. You don't have to actually get experts from elsewhere. But then again, politics is much more than just capacity. It's much more than people coming from somewhere else. So we are where we are, and Kenyans are unique people, and so is our democracy. And we thank God for that.
Interesting. Allow me to appreciate the presence of Kidi Mwaga, a lawyer and the convener of the Inter-Parties Youth Forum. Karibu sana. We were expecting you to feature prominently on the shortlisted names. We have a new youth PS in the office. Well, what's your reaction to the list that has been presented by President William Ruto? Is it inclusive? Does it mirror the face of Kenya? What's your reaction to it?
Thank you very much, my brother Jesse, for having me on the show. I'm flattered that you are expecting me to feature in the list. But yes, I am proud of my colleagues who have captured the attention of the appointing authority. And I think I wish them well. For the young people who have had opportunity to be appointed, we ask them to go in and serve with diligence, because this country and this generation depends on them. There are two ways, in the words of Professor Francis Fukuyama, through which a government gets its legitimacy. One, through the ballot, and secondly, through use of its infrastructural power. That infrastructural power is when the government delivers to the people. In the last 2 years, when people like my brother Maliba have been in government, the government has let the people down. And during and after June 25th, the young people of this country repudiated the state. It was therefore imperative that we have the president as the commander-in-chief engaging in maneuvers that could help him regain the legitimacy of the government. His first measure was to reach out to his nemesis turned brother Raila Odinga, who then gave him a bit of what you'd call borrowed legitimacy. Riding on that borrowed legitimacy, because the Constitution is clear on how we can handle the question of transfer of power, then I see that he has attempted to engage in a series of actions which are calculated in giving government the legitimacy through infrastructural power, through delivering to the people. A bit of work is happening, but not much already, because some of the actions that what you call broad-based government has undertaken, we are yet to feel their impact properly. For instance, if you look at what CS John Mbadi is doing at Treasury, it is a departure from how Treasury was handled in the first 10 years of Uhuru and how Professor Njuguna Ndung'u handled it in the last 2 years. One, he has involved the people. Involving the people, that in itself gives government a modicum of legitimacy. So I think that to this extent, we cannot, governance is not about morality tale with the simple plots. There is always the nuances that particularly as young people, we must be alive to. So in being alive to some of the actions the government has taken, I think that, and even looking at this list, I think I look at a commander-in-chief who has learnt his lessons. One, you look at this list of PSS. There was a time when a list like this would have looked like an ethnic duopoly. You would see people from certain region and certain region. Today, as we speak, even the little county of Migori is represented in that list. And we used to have a minister from that place called John Okwanyo, who taught us that anytime we are engaging in national discourse, we must ask, what about Migori? This time round, we are not asking the president, what about Migori? We have seen. So then, what that does is that it is what is anticipated in Article 10 of the Constitution, that the appointment shall reflect the face of Kenya. And why that is important, Jesse, is that when people feel included, when people look at a government and they see people who look like them, then they think and feel that they can trust that government. When a government enjoys the trust of the people, then it is easier for that government to administer. Look at it this way. You see, in the last in the last couple of months, for instance, since Senator Murkomen moved to Interior, we have all noticed, particularly since this year began, that abductions have stopped.
Where?
this year from January, we have not seen abductions.
They've not.
There's a doctor who was abducted.
There's a doctor who was just released yesterday. She was abducted this week.
Okay.
Yeah.
But one thing you will agree with me is that, for instance, we have seen the number of abductions drop significantly. What that does, you know, there was a time when government was going to be unable to conduct question of legitimate arrest. We hope that we get to a point where abduction does not feature in this country.
All right.
So that when there is a crime, police can do their legitimate work of apprehending criminals and subjecting them within the legal processes. Thank you.
Okay, Odoyo.
He raised a very important question. This week, I spoke to a friend of mine who is within the statecraft. We hadn't spoken for a long time until he realized that I had already left.
Okay.
So as we discussed, I told him about the moral dilemma I had about my mentees, and I've spoken about that consistently since last year. That is one of the moral questions I had, that people I had mentored through my leadership classes, young people were being abducted. And as we discussed about that, he told me that, do you know that these administration's abductions did not start with Gen Z? That this administration began abductions in November of 2022. At that particular point, they were abducting each other. That if you made a deal and got money, and some other faction realized that you had money, they would abduct you until you gave them that money. And that is why by the time they started abducting, by the time they started abducting Gen Zs, they were so effective. Okay. Apparently, these guys had started abducting each other from 2022, and it didn't make news because it was intra-house.
What examples?
I don't know, because it was told to me when I complained as one of the grounds. That's why I'm saying I'm reporting it. That apparently these guys had been abducting each other because of business deals and such within intra-house. So do not even. That's why you've realized that up to now the police have not really come straight forward to actually say that this is wrong. We set up a team to actually investigate. They've not reported anywhere. It looks like the political class is also very coy about it. And yet this is a serious issue. Apparently this is an official policy, and it's not just been dealt with the opponents. It's also been a problem even internally amongst themselves. And I'm told that with time that is actually going to come out.
Odoyo, as you respond, let's give him time. He's been waiting.
Mwalimu, permit me to say something before I let you come in. That it is also curious that my brother Arnold Maliba is saying this with so much eloquence just a few days since he bolted out.
No, he knows that
my brother has defended this government with his sweat and blood.
True.
Even at a time when we were saying that this government had lost its way. Now that the government is trying to correct its way, Arnold Maliba has decided that he will become a political bat.
All right.
That when listen, let me say this. No, that when
I have been consistent and I am on record.
Let's run the show.
No,
let's run the show.
He cannot run away. He cannot run away. He's rigging the show. I'm just saying, and I've been with you here on set even last year, and I was very consistent on abductions.
My brother.
Okay, relax. Odoyo Widi, come in.
But if we are going to make this show mature, one at a time, even if you say it 1 hour later, it will still be a response. Maliba has talked about abductions, but I wanted to plug in a few things. Abductions is a crime that has been there since time immemorial. In this country, if you look at the statistics, abductions were almost at the rate of 500 per year. Now, when you come up here and tell us that there was an abduction last month, it's like telling us there was a theft last month. They have always been there, and they are not state-sponsored. When criminals...
They're not state-sponsored?
When criminals do business, and one goes and abducts another who has run away with the money, what has the state got to do with it? Anyway, let's leave that there. Wait.
It's
we'll talk about that.
Disappearances. There's a reason why it's called that. so we can't say it's
because abductions are forced disappearance. It doesn't matter whether it is the state who has done it, whether it's a fellow criminal who has done it, whether it is a family member who has chosen to abduct his own child that is being denied. So abductions have always been there, and they are not legal. So let's look at, Maliba talked about and challenged why it has always been Raila who goes into this stabilizing the government, because it is him who has always been the opposition. The day you will be in, it will be your turn now to go for those handshakes. Next,
So is it about uniting Kenya or political self-preservation?
it is a good thing to do because, you know, politics is a competition in which you score by converting those who are originally your opponents into your camp. This is the period at which if you are in one camp, you bring people who are your opponents into your camp. I don't think there's anything wrong with President William Ruto bringing those who are originally his opponents into his camp. That is how you score in politics, because that is how you prepare to beat your other opponents in the next general election. You have seen that there was a time that Raila and Uhuru Kenyatta were opponents. Countdown to 2022, they were in the same camp. Now, that is how you score in politics. So I don't think people should be outraged that Raila and Ruto are working together. Ruto has scored a goal by bringing his opponents to his side. But let's also look at what Maliba said about some two people from Western has gotten out of the government. You will remember that Nakumincha has come back. You will also remember that when you read the letter that came from the executive office of the president, it read that the former PS for ICT, in ICT, the one for broadcasting, was actually promoted.
Is that a promotion?
No,
it is not you to decide. It is not you to decide.
No, I'm asking
it
you.
is the appointing authority to decide.
From your point of view, is it a promotion?
You remember when that
PS to an advisor.
It is not about what you hear. It is about what it is. You remember there was a time when the former CS for ICT, Eliud Owalo, was moved to be deputy chief of staff. They said it is at a ministerial level. Do you remember that? So it is the appointing authority who knows what is the package in that place he has put you. It is not you to decide because of the name, the name that has been given. But also, let's treat these handshakes as inclusivity, as uniting Kenyans. Because what other thing would we use to unite Kenyans? Handshakes, inclusivity in government, and such things. Let us run away from those old things of Maleva's boss when he used to say Kenya is an organization in which you must have shares to get anything in it. Let's get away with those ones.
Okay, we need to take a short break, gentlemen. As we come back, we continue with the deliberations right here in studio. And as you can see, it's getting heated. Stay with us.